Pam Garfield-Jaeger, thanks for joining the show.
Happy to be here.
Give us your story. You're the Truthful Therapist. What's your story, Pam?
Oh my gosh, my story. Well, I know. We'll just start from when I became a social worker. That was back in the late 90s. Everything was sort of normal. I did lots of stuff with kids. I did lots of stuff in schools and hospitals, group homes. So, I had a whole career. Then, let's fast forward to 2016. I came down with a really bad physical condition, which left me disabled for several years. And it was from a bad desk I had at the UCSF office. And I got a nerve injury and I had to have surgery. It was a whole thing. And then when I came back in 2021, the world had completely changed 100%. So I was just in shell shock. And they also mandated the COVID vaccine. And after all of the physical stuff I went through, the hell I went through, I was not comfortable taking a vaccine that I wasn't familiar with, that was new. I didn't trust doctors after everything I went through. So I left my new part-time job and then became the Truthful Therapist because I decided I had nothing to lose. I couldn't work full-time anyway. I had lost so many years in my career, and I felt like I was sort of called to this, to speak the truth.
So what is the truth that you're speaking?
Well, I guess what I've noticed is how my profession changed so much. Honestly, there were things we could go all day about how mental health, there's problems with it from, I guess, its conception, but that's for a different podcast, right? But there are certain things I think that most people agree upon, which is people need truth, they need reality, um, that they shouldn't be counseled upon based on the color of their skin, and they shouldn't be told that they're a victim automatically just based on immutable characteristics. And just all of the things that I thought were anti-therapeutic that were being pushed onto our field that were not there, at least not to the degree, but even 5 years ago, and especially not 10 years ago. So the truth is just how therapy has become non-therapeutic.
Yeah, in particular, you speak a lot about the transgender issue. So
That's the main one, yeah.
what are your findings there?
Well, this was my personal experience. I was just a normal person, la-di-da, go get back to my job, working in a teen program. It was both teens and adults. I was like a per diem, which means I could cover shifts for both units. And the teen unit had half the girls were identifying as trans. And I couldn't believe it. It was nothing I had seen before because, like I said, I had been out on disability just for a couple of years, and it was never like that for the 20 plus years before I had been working. And I noticed my colleagues were not saying a thing. In fact, they were affirming it, they were encouraging it, they were demonizing parents for having questions about it. One therapist said something to the effect of the child was mismatched with her parents. So not only did they believe she was supposedly born in the wrong body, she was born in the wrong family. So I was seeing all of these things, and that was very shocking to me. And so that's what made me start to notice very easily that things were not right. And I just noticed these were normal kids, or the kids that I had worked with for years, that were having different struggles, that were acting like typical teenagers, right? They were using it as power. They were using it as ways to avoid things that were uncomfortable, like things that normal kids would do, things that human beings do, quite frankly. And we as therapists are not supposed to collude with that. We're supposed to help people face things that are difficult, that are getting in the way of becoming better, right? And that was not happening.
So I guess that when you started helping these teens, probably the parents were very appreciative. I guess your supervisors were encouraging you, wow, this person's really helping these teens. And I suppose it was just a smooth way forward from there.
Is that sarcastic? You mean,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I need to do a better job of modulating my voice. So it's it throws
well,
people off sometimes.
So they at the time, honestly, I was shy about being so outspoken because I was new being on disability for so many years, right? So I was trying to get my feet wet again after all that time. So I never affirmed the kids, but I also never confronted, especially my colleagues, and said, like, what are you doing? What's happening? I asked questions here and there, but it was more tentative. It wasn't until I was basically taken out of the job position because of the mandates that I decided I was going to become really outspoken. And I was per diem, so I wasn't working one-on-one with the families. I was only running the groups. So they didn't know what I was doing with the kids behind the scenes, which was just working with them and their issues. I wasn't confronting them about being trans or not. I wasn't saying, no, you're a boy, no, you're a girl. I wasn't barking at them that there are only two genders. I was simply talking to them as human beings and addressing what was happening with them, whether that be trauma or struggles with their peers or grief and loss or whatever the issue at hand was.
Okay, so you refused to give back, so you were removed from the position. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, first of all,
Pretty much, yeah.
congratulations. Yeah, first of all, congratulations. Uh, um, I have a friend who's a teacher, and sometimes people ask, there's like this technique where you ask the class, hey, um, well, if you had been under the Nazi regime, would you have stood up for the Jews? And of course, like everyone raises their hand, everyone raises their hand. But then this friend asked, or this friend was asked, well, raise your hand if you've ever been fired for one of your beliefs. And then my friend raises his hand. He's the only
Mm.
one. So you've actually been fired for your beliefs.
It was devastating actually, because I thought I would never get back to work at all. I mean, I was bedridden for years. I thought I would never be functional. I couldn't even hold a pen. And then I finally got back. It was really meaningful. I remember having like a really sweet emotional moment with my new supervisor, how meaningful it was that I was working and that I could just be in society again. It was so
Right.
important.
Mhm.
And then they said, nope, you can't do this. And I was scared because I was so disabled. I didn't trust it. And I thought actually I was just going to get the vaccine a little later on once we just had a little more information and it'd be just fine. Um, but then, of course, we got more information and we learned there were problems with it. So it never happened. And I also had just recovered from COVID. Like I was fine. So that right when I had recovered from COVID, I still had the antibodies, even according to the bogus CDC measures, I had the antibodies, which we still have them. Even, they had a time period at that time. They were saying only for, I forgot what they were saying, 2, 3 months.
They
I
forgot what they
still,
were saying too, so don't worry
I
about
forget
it.
what they're saying because they kept changing it. But I was in that window period. So I wasn't even allowed to get the vaccine when they made the mandate. But I wasn't going to go ahead and do it. And I was per diem. I didn't have a real job. I couldn't get work a real job because I still had nerve pain. I still couldn't sit up at the desk very well. In fact, I was kind of doing my notes at home in a way that they didn't want me to. They wanted me to do it the same day, but I couldn't do that. I couldn't handle it all at the time. So I was still dealing with a lot of pain. And so it was bittersweet where I couldn't handle it in certain ways and I would have kept going and it was important to me. But on the other hand, I was like, well, this, I can't risk my health any more than I've already been through.
Well, you're a hero. You lost
I'm
your
here.
job. I'm saying you're
Thank
you're
you.
a
Oh,
hero because you
I'm a
lost your
hero. Thank
job.
you. I was gonna say I'm here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
No, no, no.
I'm
You're
here and I
here. You're
guess
here,
according to
and
you,
you're a hero.
and I'm a hero.
So this was because this is such difficult circumstances. I mean, you were just so grateful just to even have a job. And the funny thing is, you were even willing in principle to get the vaccine if it was supported.
Mhm.
I wouldn't have got it even if it was completely supported because for me, it's like at this point, there's just so much irrational hysteria behind this that I'm just not going to get it no matter what. So,
Yeah, I'm at that point now. At the time, I was still pretty naive. I still trusted the authorities to a degree, a lot more than I do today. I'll say that.
okay. So then you become more outspoken about the
Hmm.
trans issue, which is a great example of how getting canceled is the best thing that can ever happen to you. I recommend it to everyone. Get canceled. I've done it 4 times. You've gotten canceled. So what happened next?
Yeah, so I've never really, well, I was on Instagram just to post pictures of my dogs while I was disabled because that's all I could do with my time. It was just something I was doing. So, but then I started using Instagram to say really basic things about these kids. I noticed there's these kids with trauma and they're struggling and they're using these identities to avoid their issues and they're not getting the help they need. Just saying really basic things, and people were messaging me and saying how brave I was. I thought it was so strange that this was such a brave thing to say. And I got noticed by some bigger people. Jamie, who's now the head of Gays Against Groomers, she was the gay who strayed, I think, at the time. She reposted a few of my things. Buck Angel, who's an outspoken transgender person, reposted several of my things. So some bigger people with bigger platforms picked up my stuff. And so I started to get a following and I got noticed. And then I ended up being in a couple documentaries too on the subject.
But really, like what?
Mhm. Uh, my favorite one is the Epic Times one that was done by a Swedish filmmaker. It's called Gender Transformation: The Untold Realities. And that's a docudrama. So what's cool about it is they have actors that reenact a real life story of this California family where a mom was estranged from her daughter and put into foster care and put on hormones against her permission. And it has a very tragic ending. Her name is Abigail Martinez, if anybody wants to just Google her name and read more details about it. Or you could watch the film, which it shows obviously the other side of this, that this isn't all about love and acceptance, that this is really destroying families and harming people. So that one. And then there's another one that's also really good. It's called Disconnected, and it's spelled with a Y, like dysphoria and disconnected combined. And that tells us it has a bunch of different experts in it, but it tells the story of a young woman named Daisy who was trans and obviously figured out that she wasn't. And in the end, she and miraculously got pregnant after being on testosterone for 5 years, which is unheard of because it sterilizes you. It atrophies your whole reproductive system, for women, and it becomes very painful and problematic. But she was able to bear children, so it kind of looks like a miracle to me. And I can't help but watch it and cry. And I obviously know Daisy in person too. She's wonderful. So
Wow. Yeah, when you talk about this splitting apart families, it's almost like this is designed by the devil to destroy us at the point that's most valuable to us.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the intention. I think a lot of people are naive and don't realize that they're kind of being foot soldiers for really nefarious players.
So where did you go from there? Then you started being more outspoken, got you became more popular because of that. Did you get any more flack because of that?
I mean, yes and no. Like, I guess I started to ignore the flack. The first flack I got before I was the Truthful Therapist from my personal life was when I realized that Black Lives Matter was a scam. I'm really good at canceling myself, right? Uh,
Yeah, man, it's just that one was hard because I mean, you want to support it. It's called Black Lives Matter. You want to support it, but you just get on their website for 30 seconds and you realize this is just a scam meant to destroy not only black people, but also
our
just the
entire
family.
society.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I looked at the website back when they still had the destruction of the nuclear
I did.
family
I saw
as
it.
one
I
of their
saw that
stated
mess.
goals.
I remember I looked at it too.
Yeah, that was a shocker. Thankfully, they removed that. So
They took
okay,
it.
yeah.
Well, it's not thankfully because that's still their goal. They're just hiding it now.
Exactly, I know, I was being
Yeah.
sarcastic again, my bad.
Oh, Sam, I'm not. When I was really young, I think that's like a maturity thing. When I was young, I didn't understand sarcasm. It took me longer. I was a late bloomer, and I just never understood sarcasm. I feel like I'm back to that. I'm missing it.
Well, when I was young, I didn't understand social norms, so that's why I used excessive amount of sarcasm, and I still don't, unfortunately, so I'm still stuck in that phase.
Well, that's charming. I like it.
Thanks. Well, and then you have, like, the founders of Black Lives Matter they were, like, lesbian or transgender or something like this, so it's like, I don't know where did this.
The self-described Marxists is what they
Yeah,
are. They
yeah.
said that, and but a lot of the money, I don't know if they were. I'm not sure what all their identities are, but I know that a lot of that money went to transgender organizations. So I think maybe yeah, they gave. I don't know all the details of what their personal lives were, but I know that a lot of that money went to trans organizations. And that's when we really saw the boom, right? Right after all of that, 2021 is when we really saw the boom, and kids were locked down on their screens. And then there's all this funding to push it. And it was not organic at all.
So it sounds like, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like you didn't experience as much hate, hatred, I don't know what you call it, cancellation after you became independent. Am I characterizing that correctly?
See, I was an interesting situation because I had been disabled for so long. I didn't have as much to lose, I think, than a normal person. And I also learned a lot who my real friends were. And a lot of my
Oh,
friends just weren't there for me while I was having health issues. Go through a really serious
wow.
health crisis and you'll learn who your real friends are. Very interesting. And so I was on a swim team. I was very physically active. Part of what happened to me, I think, is related to my swimming. I had this condition called thoracic outlet syndrome, which is basically where my bones in my upper body, my rib and my collarbone were crushing on my nerves. And it happens to swimmers. And so I was on this swim team, and they weren't really in touch with me while I was going through my crisis. I don't really blame a lot of them for that because, people lose touch, or, you have certain people who are acquainted, certain people are closer to you. A handful of people I was disappointed by. Most of them, that's kind of how it goes, right? You lose touch, especially when you're not physically seeing them. However, when I posted about Black Lives Matter and just having questions about it, I got a whole bunch of text messages from them asking me if my account had been hacked. They were all concerned about me because they thought my account was hacked. Instead of worrying about me and I was posting about these really serious surgeries I was having, the fact that I had to drop out of my career, I hadn't shown up to practice, obviously, in several years. They weren't texting me and worried about me then. They were worried about me when I had wrong think. So
Wow, that
yeah.
is striking.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, you're in a life-altering condition, and they're not hearing anything you're not hearing anything from them, and then you have an incorrect political opinion, and they're asking if you're still alive, if you're okay.
Yeah, I mean, honestly cried that day. I was pretty devastated. Like my worldview was shattered about people. It was tough to come back from that, to still see good in people that I thought were my friends. So I've obviously made new friends, and not all of my past friends are that bad, but there were enough to shake my world.
Well, it reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from the wisdom literature, which is, "Teach us to number our days that we may gain wisdom of heart." Teach us to number our days that we may gain wisdom of heart. Which it took me years. I was reflecting on that for years before I had some understanding of it. And I think what it's saying is, when we number our days, when we see the finitude of our life, when we reflect on the reality of death, then we come to realize what's most important and live in a way that reflects that. So, serious illness, which I wouldn't wish on anyone, uh, can be a real blessing to be able to see what's important in life and who's important in life.
Yeah, it's like on one hand, there's a lot I'm grieving that time and the pain that I dealt with and the loss of my career. But on the other hand, there's so much I gained, that insight and gratitude. Even when I was in the thick of it, the way I got through it was every day I had gratitude that I could get up, that I could walk around, that I could walk my dogs. The one thing I was doing was just walking my neighbor's dog, this little 10-pound little terrier dog, and I was just so grateful to just be able to go over there and walk this little dog and say hi to my neighbor and have this nice connection. And it was just that, I mean, I went from being this kind of big cheese supervisor at UCSF to, walking this little dog every day. And I was grateful for that.
Beautiful. So it sounds like because you were independent, you didn't have as much to lose,
Hmm.
therefore you weren't attacked as much. So that gives you more freedom to double down on this. So then you start the Truthful Therapist. So what's all that about?
Yeah, so I have built a website for parents and really for anyone to understand what is appropriate therapy and how to screen for skilled therapists that aren't going to indoctrinate their child, that are going to just do therapy and not do social justice warrior things in the clinical, in the So I really wanted to empower parents. That was my vision, to not just blindly trust experts. Time I was building it, there was a big movement against, or just noticing the educational system, noticing that teachers were not doing what they're supposed to do, because they saw through Zoom there was a lot of problems within the educational system. But they weren't seeing what was happening in the medical offices and in the therapy offices. They were still trusting counselors.
Hmm.
And I was at the time, I was like, well, there's these teachers that are doing all these crazy things, but look at the counselors. They're not so kosher either. And stay involved. That was my biggest message. Stay involved, trust yourself, don't blindly trust experts, ask questions. You need to be part of the process. So that was a lot of what my platform was about. And of course, the trans thing is neatly fits into that, but it's really bigger than that. It's not just trans, because it's anything. But the trans thing is really a symptom of that problem, that parents have kind of handed off their kids to therapists to say, like, fix my kid, or I don't know any better. You tell me what to do. And that's not how it should go. It should be collaborative, and parents should always be the ones in charge, because they are the parents of their children.
Exactly. What does Truthful Therapist offer?
So I do have online classes on my website, and it has a lot of past interviews and things on there too, and a lot of classes where it's just, what do you ask? What is appropriate therapy? What are different types of therapy out there? Like, what are the basics, so you know how to ask what they're doing? Because a lot of counselors really aren't getting those trainings. They're just learning social justice things. They're learning about systemic racism and things like that, but they're not learning what is cognitive behavioral therapy, or what is EMDR, and how to really treat trauma, just how to do family therapy. So just giving them some basic knowledge on, so they can ask those questions. And then the main thing I do now is consultations with parents, and then a lot of writing, quite frankly. I do a lot of articles and writing, and I'm working on some training.
Where are you hoping to go with this?
So a few things, I really like to get more these trainings out for other like-minded therapists. I'm working on one now with a colleague of ours, Lisa Mustard. It's going to go on her website, because she has the credentials for now, and then hopefully I'll get them myself, so that other therapists can get the CEUs. So that's really important. I did write a book called A Practical Response to Gender Distress: Tips and Tools for Families. I actually have it here next to me. I'll hold it up for those that are watching me. Yeah.
Nice. It looks pretty big. Is it like a workbook or?
No, it's a 6 by 9. I don't know. It's normal.
Oh, okay.
I
Maybe
guess
it's
my
just the
head is small.
perspective.
um, for those who are just listening, I'm just being a goof on the camera. Okay, so so I've written that book, and that book is useful. It's written really for parents. It's written, with just very simple language, very accessible, very practical, as the title implies, on how to like like kind of inoculate your children from this to begin with, but if they get caught up in the trans agenda, what to do and what to say, and then also kind of how to stand up for yourself with professionals that might be manipulating you and your family. Like, I have a chapter, I attended a CAMPT, California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists conference, and I went to a few of their trainings, and I wrote up one of the trainings that I attended there, that was intended to help, I would say, the way I describe it is manipulate parents to go along with the trans thing, but they would say support parents of gender diverse children. So I wrote up that entire training, so that parents know how therapists are being trained to
Nice.
manipulate them specifically.
Nice.
So they can know. I'm trying to give them like the inside scoop. Like, for example, I'll just say here, they use the Kubler-Ross stages of grief for parents to say, well, when you have a trans kid, you're now grieving your cis child. That's how they frame it.
That's
It's
so
like, it's
dark.
so right. Exactly. And it's so manipulative, because first of all, their kid is their kid. They're still there. In a way, they're grieving the child that just they know, that's not no longer, that's maybe stuck in a cult-like mentality. Yeah, but that's not the way they're framing it. So they're, instead of acknowledging that this kid is struggling and being indoctrinated and groomed, they're pushing the parent to support this new identity, and instead of acknowledging that this can have a lot of harm both psychologically and physically, which my book explains what that is. And then at the end, it has a lot of questions you can even use to start a conversation with a child or a teenager. It's really geared for parents of teenagers. I mean, the parents with much younger kids, I'm not really speaking to them because usually they're the ones on board with this, and I'm not, not speaking to them. I'm speaking to the ones that know this is wrong and don't know what to do, or maybe are ambivalent and don't know what to do. Um, so yeah, there's all kinds of information there, and it's also very good for other like-minded professionals that just want to know how to maybe start a conversation with a trans-identified youth, or a family therapy session, or even help guide parents on what to do. Because a lot of it, I think, is more about parents and less about the kids. I mean, it's both, but often I think it's more important to work with the parents in a situation like this, because usually it's the kid looking for something within the family situation.
What words do you have to a professional who is who who understands the truth, who wants to speak the truth, but is held back by fear?
See, I feel like it's not fair when when I answer these questions, because, like I said, my circumstances were so different and I had so much less to lose. So I have a lot of empathy for people who are scared because they have much more to lose, especially those who maybe are the primary breadwinners of their family, or providing health insurance for their kids. And that's not my situation because I have a disability. However, I also think that you need to figure out, what is your line? What is your moral line in the sand, and how far are you willing to go before you really feel like your guts are being eaten out inside, because you are going against everything you believe, and you're seeing children being harmed, or families being torn apart, even adults that are mentally ill, vulnerable, they're all being taken advantage of. So for those that are recognize that and see how harmful this is, I guess my open-ended question would be, how far are you willing to let it go before you speak up, and maybe have to give something up? Um, Easy for me to say. But I would also say the advice I'd give is, start some off ramps. You start maybe a side hustle. Figure out, if you know how to start building a private practice if you're working for a bigger organization. Figure out what are some other skills you have, that if you maybe taking a break from the mental health industry and doing something else, so that you can still build an income. Kind of, I'd say, make a plan and get an off ramp, so that you can be more outspoken if there is too much to lose for your family. But recognize it is important, and we need you. We need your voice. And a lot of people agree, but they are scared. So we need you.
I love that. So to the Virtuous Leaders audience, build up your side hustles, be an entrepreneur. You can listen to my episode interviewing John Lee Dumas from Entrepreneurs on Fire. But more importantly than that, have a moral clarity with what are your values, and how far are you willing to go. Being honest with yourself. That's what being a virtuous leader is all about, is knowing where to draw the line and being willing to make that sacrifice when that line gets drawn. Well,
And then also remember that your voice is really important. I think people forget that. It's funny if people up to me now, like, oh, but you have this platform, or you've gotten on these shows. I was just a normal person. Not only was I a normal person, I was disabled. I was like bedridden for years. I was just blah. So I'm just normal, and you're just normal. We need all of our voices, and your voice is important.
absolutely. How can people follow you, Pam?
So I'm on Instagram as at the truthful therapist. I'm on Twitter or X as Truth Therapist. And I'm on YouTube, which I just mostly just put in clips of interviews and some of my old Instagram stuff, which is at the Truthful Therapist. I have a Substack, which is Pam the Truthful Therapist. I have a website, which I talked about, which has those courses. And if you want to book a consultation with me, both professionals do it with me sometimes, and then mostly it's parents who do. And that is thetruthfultherapist.org. Oh, and I have a children's book coming, And there's a website for that, which is pretty minimal at the moment, but it's going to get built up more. And that is froggygirlbook.com. And I'll just hold it up so I have it here. I have a cute children's book coming, and the official launch date is not official, but we're looking at early May. It's called Froggy Girl, and it's about a little girl who wishes she was a frog, but she learned that she can't really do all the froggy stuff. So she has some self-reflection and learns being a little girl is better.
Kind of like Johnny the Walrus.
It's a lot like Johnny the Walrus, but there's no like sawing of feet in it. But yeah,
It
it's
looks like
similar.
maybe it's longer, maybe it's a little bit more detailed, it looks like.
Rhymes too. Mine rhymes. Oh, and the artist is a detransitioner. His name is
Oh,
Nicholas Blooms, and he's a man who used to believe he was a woman who took estrogen, has suffered some harm from that, and feels very strongly in self-acceptance and to love yourself how you are. And he's much more grounded and balanced now that he's accepted himself as a man, as a gay man. A man who's a little more feminine in nature, but he's a man.
good for him for detransitioning. Well,
Hmm.
thank you, Pam.
You're welcome.